Hello, so what is buying and owning games? Because I saw this topic rising in interest, but people are pulling their punches a lot, and I will not. And clearly, the simplest example would be a single player game, or you can kind of argue for LAN games, but those are not really relevant these days. But basically, the gold standard was that you only really get to own it, that basically you bought the game and you had it via the disc, and no one could really take that away from you. You could install whenever you wanted and play as much as you want. You didn't have to worry about any outside thing. Your only concern, perhaps, was that the disc goes bad, right? But even that wasn't a major concern. Still, in this case, you can argue that making an illegal copy for yourself is just a straight up plus, because you're guaranteeing that you get to keep your access that you paid for. Well, if you use a platform, you possibly have the convenience that you download it, but we're gonna be expanding on that. But basically, you pay for access, and if the platform goes bust, so does your access. And sure, people are gonna say that I don't think Steam is gonna go bust, or I don't think Epic Store is gonna go bust, but you don't know. And you really just have to look far into the future. And you largely don't even have this option that you get to own the game for yourself, that you get to install it without any third party. And if you look at online games, then we have a problem from the get-go, that owning the disc means nothing. Although I use the word disc here, I'm not even sure if most people even have the capacity to put a disc into their PC these days. But essentially, you can think about it this way, that you're not getting a book that you can just use whenever you want, but you are gaining access to a platform where you can read what you paid for till they don't really want you to. Although, they can make all the changes, they can even, in almost all cases, just kick you out whenever they feel like it. If you actually bothered to read the TOS, they're gonna say that, oh, you're so toxic or whatever. They're gonna take your money for the game, for the transactions, and might shut down the game like 2 months later. So this is the only owning. And if you buy it on a platform, then all you really achieve that even the platform is unreliable. And almost certainly you don't have a choice. And truly your only way of possibly safeguarding against that possibility, if you even have a choice, other than buying and not buying, is trying to buy on a platform that is more established. Now, some might argue that platforms are great. They are so convenient. But are they? Let's compare them to piracy, because people tend to say like, oh, piracy is so bad. But because I can't help but feel that is an argument made from ignorance. Because what do you do without a platform? You basically have all the people sharing information online on the internet, and you have the entire world sharing information for free. And truly the only advantage of a platform I can think of is that it maybe results in a faster download. And I'm truly approaching it from the perspective of someone who's going out there looking for information. And with that perspective, it's like you want a sandwich and the platform comes in and they slip their dick inside the sandwich for a hefty price and they can take it away anytime. And I'm going to argue that their only purpose is to collect money, not to enhance the experience. And arguably, in every single way, other than possibly download speed, you get a worse experience, especially because you are exposed to advertisement. And I will emphasize that you are paying for the content and the business practice. So effectively, you might see more of both. So perhaps you might think that it would be a good idea if you could return games for like a month after you bought it. Like, this is just your opinion. But as long as people keep paying for whatever deal is on offer, that will never manifest other than possibly some lawbringers really forcing it. And you might be thinking that, oh, but I do have to pay the platform as I don't get the content. But truth is that not really. You can just get the information and you can send money to the creator or the studio if you enjoyed the content, if you feel like it. And partly the problem with the world that people tend to look past, that we accept like marketing and sales and whatever, but the point is to create irrational, misinformed, impulsive customers who get paid for, who get milked for as much as possible. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying this is what you should do necessarily, but you should only support the platform if you really approve of it. And the reason I had to make a large detour for platforms is because the studio pretty much doesn't matter if you have to buy their stuff on a platform. And truly the main counter argument would be that it's probably gonna be fine, right? Perhaps it's not going to be that, but there are going to be less popular decisions, and there is nothing you can do about it. Now, this might seem like a foreign concept, but in the age where you just bought the game on a CD and you just played it, it doesn't matter if they lost their minds like 5 or 10 years later. Not a problem. In fact, almost nothing gets to die. They are killed. Almost no golden goose gets to die of old age. They almost certainly will be strangled to death as they're slowing down, perhaps even before. So, in the context of single-player games, yeah, sure, you can use an older version, even if you are on a platform. Perfect. But, do you have that possibility in an online multiplayer game? No. If they make changes you don't like, well, it sucks to be you. And you may have bought the game. You may have paid so much money, and you're gonna say that, you're making some dumb changes. I'm gonna, possibly, on my own, let's not go into the details here, but play an older version of that game with other people who are interested in that. And the studio is gonna be like, we can't have that. I cannot think of anything more criminal. In many cases, they make the game worse, so you pay more. And what can studios do? And what do studios do? Because largely they just do what they can get away with. I guess one factual thing they can do is not have a copy protection, which actually tends to hurt at least future sales, but has no noticeable effect on even the first sales figures. So it's something to feel better about for some business guys, I suppose. Yet this doesn't really preserve the game, really. And arguably the only real solution is to make the game free and open source after the bust. Because you might argue that maybe you can have some minimal checking of who bought the game and whatnot. But if you're not selling that, and also even that checking is dubious. Also, do new customers have a possibility of buying it? Especially because many of these could be online games that might need the community to keep it alive. This both could mean the server cost and other maintenance costs. So suppose the game has a lot of bugs or struggling to work on new systems, you cannot really fix this in their code. You just have access to the binary, you can just try to run it. And possibly there are some few things to get it to work, but you cannot really fix it. And the con would be truly everything else, because even if they have a reputation for customer friendliness, again, you gotta think long term. So a studio that could be hailed as a hero around 2000 might be hated like 20 years later, if it even takes that long. Yet, almost certainly this is kind of naive. And I would say gaming is a pretty immature market. You gotta keep in mind that it is digital goods where people pre-order and pay so much money for microtransactions for random trash. If not even mentioning the phone games. So online games are pretty much a lost cause, while single player games mainly, arguably, kept alive because of piracy, if you call it that. You can possibly give credit to platforms, but I'm not sure they deserve it. Because you can just pay, lose access to the platform, therefore lose access to everything you had there. So you pay to enter and can be kicked out anytime. Yet it's still nothing compared to online games where you pay to enter, maybe pay to stay, and buying GameStop can be kicked at any time or be shut down. And they can change the game to whatever they want, and you have zero recourse. Maybe you can make the argument that a game where you never really bought the game, but you possibly pay monthly subscription is clearer. So basically, keep paying to keep playing. But often it would still not be like Netflix. So imagine if you paid for Netflix, but also kind of sold you movies, right? But that means nothing, right? Because if you don't pay the subscription, then you cannot watch them. And I've seen some questionable decisions. I'm not gonna say the games, but perhaps in one, I saw that the devs thought that they can get more money from the players, especially the players who were not paying that much or nothing. In this case, it was a free-to-play game, and they made a patch that got rid of like 95% plus of the player base, which effectively killed the game for even those who were paying. Another genius game thought that it was a great idea to redesign the game after years. Actually, multiple games I can think of that did this. After years of success, they redesigned the game and they pretty much killed it. And I mean by a very significant margin. So pretty much the takeaway is that if you play an online game, you're screwed. You're entirely at the mercy of the studio and the platform. And your only hope that their greed is driving them towards decisions that are going to be good for you. And while owning a single player game's disc seems like a great option, it is largely not a real one these days. So clearly the only option is to be a pirate, meaning the foreign concept of actually paying for what you want to see more of, what you actually approve of. Do you think I bother? I'm on Linux. Do you think I buy new games? I'm not really interested. But also there are open source online games that could have actually fairly welcoming communities. And if you don't like the game, then you can just change it. Or you can just use whatever version you want. And as long as you can get anyone to play with you, then no problem. Although I do understand the logistic issue that, yeah, in most cases, especially for something like an MMO, you need a lot of players playing on the same version. But this might not apply to all games. You might just need one other guy. In fact, most games tend to cap out at like 10 to maybe 12 players. So my point is, you don't need a lot for an active community. And you might also come to realize that making changes that makes the game good and making changes that makes more money is not the same thing. And even if we completely ignore the money aspect, you're just gonna go and spend whatever it takes. But you would be still screwed in every single online game. And let's say that you don't even care how the game changes. You're still not gonna outlive the end of the platform or the end of the game. And if you like the game and want to play it some more, then that is too bad. And well, single player games seem a lot more reasonable because at the very least, even if nothing else, you can just torrent it after. But let's suppose this scenario. They release a game and it is relatively popular. They might release a few patches, but it's still broken as hell. Yet they never release the code. And in a way, the game actually gets more broken over time because it was perhaps never meant to work on multi-core systems and other operating systems than the one that was available at the time. And ultimately, they just don't care. They already got paid. And in fact, letting an old online game run it might actually hurt future sales. That would be the nightmare of some kind of company that actually releases some unoriginal games that, let's say that they had a very old version of their game is so popular, but also makes zero money and completely nullifies any future sales. You don't want that. You want that game to die right now. Either you want to keep selling new games or milk the old one with battle passes and microtransactions. But this really goes to show that it is destiny, essentially. So yeah, you bought the game and it was like fine, possibly year one. But then you see more monetization come in later. And you never really signed up for that. can you really argue that it's something that enhances the experience? And that's some kind of pay-to-win garbage, and it didn't have to be. And self-evidently, fundamentally, the platforms exist, and all this nonsense exists, and the code is hidden, and possibly copy protection is applied, even though it might just annoy the customers, while the pirates actually just get rid of it. But fundamentally, all of this exists to get paid at the expense of worse experience. Especially if you try to play some kind of older game, you can realize that even if it stays playable, it's not gonna remain an optimal experience because it's pretty much just frozen in time. And online games are kind of fundamentally a lost cause unless they are open source. But also, you oftentimes see that this pretty much applies to every time, is that the middleman exists only to make the experience worse and get paid. And this is truly not a crusade against games. Instead, one of the main reasons why I actually kind of lost interest in games is because the gaming industry is kind of sketchy. And I would really struggle to find an argument why trying to play all those psychological tricks on me so I pay more is in my interest. And the prevailing philosophy is that get paid, and if the game doesn't work or can't be played, not my problem. Although single player is probably gonna be fine, but no thanks to them, which would be absolutely fine, but they also make it far more difficult. So that's it.